I remember there's one particular horse that lives in our herd, and her name's Rosie, and she's a standard bred. That means she was a pacer in the racing industry. And after she was no longer of use as a racehorse, she was sent to a company that used her for embryo transfers. So they basically impregnated her with the embryo from another horse that was more valuable. So for a few years she was used and abused like that. And then at the end of the day she ended up at Echuca sales, an absolute bag of bones, standing in the meat pen waiting to be auctioned off. And she caught my eye, A, because her stomach was rumbling so loudly from being so hungry that you could hear her from several pens away. But as I got closer, I saw she was standing with her head dropped, and there was a little boy standing on the outside of the pen. He was probably about 8, and he was singing to Rosie, and he had his arms through the bars and she had her head resting in his arms. And it was the most amazing thing to see. And when I came back, I did a lap round the entire saleyards, and I came back about an hour later and she was still standing there with her head resting in the little boy's arms, and he was still singing to her. So we couldn't obviously see Rosie be processed for human consumption. So we rescued her and brought her back to Tasmania, and she lives in the herd with our horses. It's always a highlight for Eliza and I to spend time with the herd of horses, but there's also the fact that it reminds you of sad things about the animals that you can't save. And there was one horse at Echuca sales that we didn't save. We couldn't fit him in the truck. He was a horse called Deposer, and he was a thoroughbred. Most of the horses at the sales that go for meat are racehorses. About 40,000 horses a year are processed for human consumption in Australia, and Deposer was one of those. And when we got home and my daughter searched the brand on his shoulder, we discovered that he was a horse that was born in Ireland. He raced in England, the United States, Hong Kong, Australia. He had one owner, and he made that owner $1 million. At the end of the day, when he finished racing, and he had been treated like a king. His pictures are all over the internet. People loved that horse. But at the end of the day, he ended up like every other meat horse, in a pen at Echuca, wondering what the hell was going on. He looked so bamboozled. The king had landed in a meat pen. And I will never forget seeing that horse being beaten up the ramps onto the meat trucks just like every other horse there. So people need to be aware, I think, that racehorses don't end up happy. At the end of their racing life, they end up being eaten by humans or eaten by dogs, even if they did make $1 million.
To touch and Deposer in a fight. Great guys coming through late. He's after them quickly. Deposer in front from Master Touch. Deposer, boil over. Deposer beat Master.